the hardest part, which feels like the most overwhelming part, but actually the most liberating, when you give yourself the opportunity, is to look at every single number, is to look at it meticulously and have a look at them, because that feels and sounds very overwhelming. But actually, the moment that you confront the numbers, it feels very liberating and empowering. Why? Because now you can make smarter financial decisions, because the overwhelm comes from a place of not knowing, of the unknown, and not knowing what your next step should look like if you haven't got a handle of what is happening in your pocket, in your bank account.
To Black Income Creators Podcast. I'm Max, and today I have Cleo Matlou with me. If you could introduce yourself, Cleo, and tell people a little bit about what it is that you do.
Hello, thank you for having me. So I'm Cleo Matlou. I am a financial coach and money trauma specialist, and I support mainly women to improve their relationship with money so they can create a financial legacy that they are proud of without exchanging more time for money. And that is through looking at different avenues of financial investing, whether it be properties, whether it be stocks and shares, whether it be agent investing, just ensuring that women are feeling empowered and liberated when it comes to money without feeling that they're unworthy, that they're not enough, because you're all whole, complete and enough.
And when do women, well, predominantly women, but when do people typically come and find you? Where are they when they sort of decide they need your services?
It's a running theme, which I understand why they come at this point, but actually every single person is like, I wish I came to you before. And it's usually at the point where they're feeling like there's some form of consistency with income. They are coming towards their, mid-30s, when it's just like, I can't have the same habits as I was when I was in my 20s, to really ensure that I'm multiplying my wealth. And they start to think about what does it get to look like when I decide to retire, or that they just want to be in a position where they want to really give a go in the next 3 to 5 years of building the financial foundations, which then allow them to ease off in doing the work harder, want to work smarter, and want to make better financial decisions. And it comes to a point when they're in a reflecting space of, what legacy they want to leave behind, and ensuring that I'm putting the right blocks in place and foundations in place so that can scale and multiply over time.
So is it typically sort of people who are, in their 30s, 40s, what kind of age range do you typically find people are having those conversations?
Yeah, so mid-30s to mid-40s is my usual demographic. I do have women who are in their 50s as well. And it's just, I feel quite exposed and I'm experiencing financial anxiety of thinking, I don't want to be in poverty when I decide to slow it down when it comes to work. And it's just literally from that perspective, really. And where I'm at, number one, I'm not too sure what I've got in terms of what will take me to that point in time of when I decide to slow it down and retire. I don't know what I need to in terms of where I retire. And I don't know what I want to even look like. And right now I know that I'm at a ceiling. I've come into a self-imposed glass ceiling when it comes to increasing my income or multiplying my wealth. And I know that my habits and behaviours are not going to take me to where I desire to be when it comes to money. And it's that self-awareness of knowing I've got so far as I possibly can on my own.
Yeah, and I think it's, like you say, it's a self-awareness, because very few people have that until, like you say, they're at the point where it's like, I don't have a pension.
Yeah.
I've not got a plan for the next 25 years, Do you find that, especially with women, it comes after relationship changes, for example? So that could be, like a divorce or something like that, where they've had joint finances, perhaps they haven't been as financially exposed.
Yeah, so it comes from multiple reasons. Becoming parents is definitely a big one, of like, then I don't want them to be in a place where I was when I was young, because a lot of the women I work with are the first generational wealth makers in their lineage, and they want to be breaking the generational cycles to ensure that they're paying it forward while paying it back. So the trigger is be it having children, or coming to a point where they're becoming adults and going, what have I got to give to them when they get to that certain age? And some judgment around that, of not putting financial foundations for them beforehand, and feeling like, oh, what is it that I'm going to be able to provide them to give them a better footing that I'd received? And also it's lack of pension, or feeling that they have lack of pension or lack of money, ways that they're going to be able to live comfortably in retirement, start to really dawn on women around in their 40s, for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you say it's like first generation sort of wealth builders. Is that typically sort of immigrants that have come in, and so these are like, first British born, for example? Mm-hmm. Yeah, is that what you're finding, or was it typically just an education thing, perhaps, where it's maybe second, third generation, so Caribbean second, third generation, but this is the first generation that's maybe had an education past A levels, if you like, or something like that?
It's a mixture of that. So being the children of immigrants, and are British born, and their parents did what they could with the resources that they had when they came to this country, and they now see that they have the advantage to do more. And where they are noticing, or haven't quite noticed, but know there's something not quite right and aligned, is that the beliefs that they were taught around money, which is from their immigrant parents, ones that have come from abroad, is a place from scarcity, and rightly so to a lot of it, because the disparities that they had and they faced was very in your face, and it was all a point of survival. And where they see that they have an opportunity to thrive now, they realise that their money beliefs and their behaviours and what they was told about money growing up is now inhibiting them to actually multiply their wealth, because they only know what they know. And it's the knowledge piece in terms of that, from that respect, but it's also the confidence and just the habits and behaviours that you do in it every single day, and how you approach money is the biggest part that I work on, to help women move forward in terms of creating those value-based financial goals, for them to succeed and be wealthy.
Yeah, I mean, I bang on about this. I've said it in a few other podcasts, but from my experience, especially for Black women, the issue is around sort of the black tax. So even when they are starting to make money, a lot of that money is sort of community money. So, there's siblings, there's parents, there's grandparents, whether it be here or back home. And so a lot of that money doesn't stay within the household and then allows them to build that legacy. There is that kind of guilt associated with having money and having to make sure that everybody else around you has similar access to that money. Is that something that you're finding quite a lot with your clients?
Absolutely. And it's creating those loving financial boundaries is a big is a big part of the work that I do. And it's also to always ensure that you honor and respect the cultural differences amongst my clients, because Caribbean and African do have even different ways of and different perspectives from that point of view around the black tax. And it's and that's why I really, really talk about value-based financial goals. Just by having a financial goal is great, but if you're not incorporating what your values are within those financial goals, then you'll be chasing a financial blueprint that's not going to be in alignment to you. You're just doing what people say that you should do, without actually embedding the nuances of who you are, what you stand for, what you believe, and what is important to you, because that's going to be different to absolutely everybody. And some people are going to find what you feel is logical very illogical, but it's true to you, it's your purpose, and it's what is in alignment to you. So for an example, I say, it's all well and good to say to the black taxes to say to switch off the tap completely. Some people will feel that that's what they want to gradually get to, because that's something that no longer serves them, and over time that's something that they want to start to have continuous conversations of, this is now inhibiting me. What I want to do is pay it forward in terms of the new generation that I'm going to be bringing up, and be allow them to have even better opportunities than I did. Or some people will be like, you know what, this is one of my duties, and I'm okay with that. I feel empowered by being able to input into the community of the family and to contribute. What you can then look at is, how do you get to ring fence a certain amount, and to be able to say, I put this aside, this is what the pot is. And once the well's dry, to find a healthy balance. So then you can still continue to be on the path that you desire when it comes to elevating your wealth and multiplying your wealth, and equally also serve the purpose of yourself. What's important is to be able to contribute into the community. But no, there's no right or wrong answer, and that is the whole point when you do value-based financial goals, because it's, for some, that will be like, I'm not ring fencing. Some people will say there's going to be nothing there at all. Some people will be like, well, actually, it is going to be more free flow, but I'm okay with that. Actually, now having this conversation makes me realize that is more important to me than focusing on what's to come, and to ensure that what I'm here for is to ensure that the community is looked after and dealt with. There is no wrong answer. And I think that's the beauty of being able to incorporate your values to your financial goals.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier about, lots of people come to you when they've become parents makes a lot of sense, because obviously there might have been patterns, they're a daughter, they're a sister, but now they're a mum or a dad. And then that changes their relationship, because they're thinking, they're not just thinking about themselves and what they do, but they're thinking, oh, hold on, would I want my children to carry on these kind of values, potentially, and that's, all well and good, but it might not serve their children. So I think that's when they're starting to have those conversations with yourself. Also, from what you're saying, I think lots of people may not be ready at the time that they come to you to change some of those, boundaries or whatever, but at least having the awareness that they may not be serving their long-term goals may mean that 2-3 years down the line, they're like, hold on a minute, what Cleo said was actually, you know what I mean? It sticks with people, it's in their subconscious. So I think over time, they will move away from some of those kind of firmly held positions. So typically, how long do people work with you? Is it sort of session based, or is it time based? How long do you think is like the perfect time for people to work with a coach like yourself?
I find it's the sweet spot, particularly one-to-ones, to 6 months, because what I find is the unraveling of the beliefs and the behaviors and the habits of money takes a really good solid 3 months, not only to bring the awareness, but start to take aligned action, because it's all well and good to say that I know, but what are you doing with the knowing? It's like, the saying, as knowledge is power, has been diluted so much now, because we have so much knowledge at our fingertips. And that knowledge is great unless it's only great unless you take aligned action with the knowledge that you have. So that's why it's really important, and have the money trauma perspective in place with the work that I do, is because that's 80% of the work. That's the part. I mean, everybody, I actually was thinking to speak about this and in some content, but Simone Biles has been a prime example in terms of how she's been able to come over some major demons mindset wise, how she's feeling about herself. The last, Olympics, I don't think she even did the last Olympics, but she didn't do it before well. And she decided that she's going to completely come back, come away from everything and just sort out how she's feeling about herself before she came back, and she's come back with a vengeance. Why? It's not like she didn't know the strategy. Like I say, the financial strategies, you probably know them pretty well, better than and once you do know them, there isn't any secret. It's more straightforward than you realize. It's just, that's another story in terms of how keeping the status quo and keeping the rich and the poor, of the lack of knowledge, I believe, which is why it's not being taught formally. The strategy is very straightforward, how to financially plan, etc. We all can grasp that pretty quickly, even if you're not great with maths, because guess what? Money isn't maths. It's not logical. It's not yes or no, right or wrong. It's emotional. It's psychology. And that's why the importance of focusing on the 80% is critical for you to have sustainable financial wealth that grows over time with you and connects out from it pretty quickly. It feels slow at the beginning, but then the compound, as it always does, all of a sudden just skyrockets. And it's just having that trusting knowing that once you do work on the mind and body piece around money, the strategy will just fall out the other side. There's so many clients I've actually worked with that we barely opened spreadsheets, because once it landed with them, there's like, I'm running with it. They now feel confident in their own model, how they do it. Like, it doesn't have to be the way that I show you, whatever feels good for you. And they've just ran with whatever way and structure that they wanted to build, and how they manage their money is right. I show you a way, but it's not the way. And it's just in identifying what works for you, in knowing that your mind and body is aligned with the trajectory that you going in. So the 3 months is very critical to really focus on the mind, and then not to say that we don't do strategy in part of it, but it's just more heavy weighted in the psychology of money first, and then the strategy starts to build itself.
Well, yeah. And just to give people a bit of a perspective on your background, so you're ex-accountant, I think it was. Yeah. So how did you make that transition? Because that is quite a sort of interesting one. So being very, very focused on the numbers and the sort of, and moving towards the people and the emotions behind it.
Yeah. So I've always been a people's person, and my drive really to chase the money is because there wasn't much in my household. And the things that I wanted to do was very creative, very artistic, and people being very successful in that is very far and few. And I was just like, I'm not being poor again, so I chased the money, and like, how do I chase the money? I can go into finance. And so that's what my logic was. And I was good with maths. So that was my logic into becoming an accountant. And the part that was just draining my soul whilst being an accountant is just, pushing numbers around in the spreadsheets. What the part that I enjoyed the most was telling the story of numbers. So the narrative around numbers, what does numbers explain to me? What is numbers saying about, the performance of a business, performance of how we're doing as a whole, and what's the lookouts, the risks and opportunities, the threats, and the triumphs going forward. So that was the part that I realised, I enjoy that piece when I was in corporate. Alongside that, I was doing a lot of women empowerment work. But what I noticed is that you would do all the power poses, the confidence workshops, the imposter syndrome workshops. Now I want to talk about money. Nobody wants to talk about money. I was just like, well, in order for you to elevate, to gain more resources, options, and to increase your freedom, the resource that's going to support you with that is money. So money is not the end destination. It's just the byproduct of helping you make more better decisions and expand the options and choices that you have. So by not having the skills or the confidence to negotiate your salary, or to be having a business where you are charging really low, and you're having to work so many more hours just to get to the breadline because you're pricing too low. I was like, there's some disparity here. There's just something not quite right. And I started my business actually more financial education, but what I realized, the sustainable change wasn't happening, because I'll show you the strategy and you do it for a couple of months and you fall off the wagon. And that's when I realized this is the psychology, and looking at my career, looking at how people responded to numbers. It's the psychology piece, which is why I got qualified as a financial coach and a money trauma specialist, to really underpin those areas. And I've always been very curious about the brain. Psychotherapy is my second career that I'm working towards. And I really think financial therapy is an overlooked area that people would truly benefit from if they knew more about it.
And how have you found sort of like, again, transitioning from corporate to, being self-employed is quite scary for a lot of people. So how did you find that journey?
Being an entrepreneur is actually very confronting as a type of who you are, because everything feels very personal, because it is your baby. Your business is your baby, and, you can get very tiger mummish if someone's going to say something about your baby, or just not be responsible for your baby. So, and that's how I see business from a perspective of self. But I'm very, very business oriented, when it comes to the exchange of money and being very authoritative and self-leadership, if from that way, very gracefully done, but to be able to really anchor in of my self-worth. And that's a massive thing when it comes to self-worth and money. We entangle how we feel about ourselves with money and our self-worth, and we make money and our business performance be reflective of who we are. So that's the biggest confronting piece, I think, in terms of entrepreneurship. And by working in tandem with yourself and also the business, I think is really, really important if you're coming from the employee mindset. Because where you can be very detached of the performance of the business and just show up and just do your job and get paid. Actually, there's a whole different way of being for you to be showing up, because you are everything. You're the salesperson, you're the PR, you're the marketing, you wear like 9 to 11 hats. And it's a massive learning curve when you're not living, you haven't had to do that as an employee, because you really only had to have one very narrow responsibility. So it can be very confronting in terms of like your strengths and your weaknesses, and who you show up as a person every single day has an impact in the way that your business is. Yes. So there is a lot of self-worth, I believe, that entrepreneurs are required to do in order for them to feel very successful in their business.
Yeah, I mean, it affects everything from pricing to like branding. A lot of the time when people are starting out as an entrepreneur, they tend to go to a customer base that doesn't have any money, because they're like, that's where I'm at. So, to me, so instead of them saying, well, actually, I was here corporately, I need to sort of match that, they don't. And they'll be like, oh, no one's going to pay me more than, 50 quid for this. So, so they price themselves lower, and then they're struggling. And like you say, they're going to have to work all the hours under the sun. And I think the other big transition, like I've got a team of like 3 or 4 people working for me now. But I was solopreneur for, 15, 16 years. So that transition now to having to manage people and, also manage their relationship to the business and making money for the business is quite different to just me knowing, okay, I need to pay my mortgage, I need to, do all this kind of stuff. So there is something around that transition that I think is, and it can be quite isolating. I think it's a good place for people to get a coach at that stage to be able to help them through that transition, as opposed to sort of going it solo and making a lot of mistakes early days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where a lot of entrepreneurs get lost with the numbers, where they say, I will deal with that later on. It's like, actually, no, focus on the money now. Like it's not later, it's absolutely now. And align yourself with your money beliefs and your relationship with money now, because that is going to bleed into everything, the way that you show up. If you haven't got that relationship with money tight, because that feeds into, like I said, your visibility, how you show up, and even your brand voice, because it's kind of like, oh, if I end up being audacious, then no one's going to pay me. You know, if I end up being if I be my true self, then no one's going to be paying me for those services. If I talk audaciously about money and say how much money I want, you know, people are going to think I'm this or that. You know, if I speak about this topic, then this employer that I worked with 7 years ago and have something to say about it, even though they probably don't care, not watching you whatsoever, you know, and it all has an impact over the way you show up. If you don't be confronting of your relationship with money and and your money mindset.
Yeah. One of the things that is quite key is around things like emotional spending, and managing that. And I just wonder, is that something that people struggle to change, or is it something that they're even aware of? It's like emotional eating, really, isn't it? It's something.
It is. And I mean, you have people who emotionally spend or who don't spend at all. You know, you have the different spectrums, and they can be born off a multiple of things. But emotional spending, it's numbing yourself and self-soothing rather than self-nourishing yourself through money. So it's to avoid how you're feeling about yourself, and then using money as something to numb the feeling of what you're actually truly feeling. And that's can be a very vicious cycle that people go into and then wonder why they haven't got any money. It's because there has been an emotion that maybe nothing to do with money that's come up, and you feel that spending something that you don't need or want is going to make you feel better. Then you receive the item, you buy the item, and then a few days later you feel worse because it's like, I really didn't have that. I didn't need to spend that money. It was wasteful. I don't feel great that decided that decision because it hasn't served me in any way or purpose. You feel down. You try and resist not to spend anything emotionally, but then you justify spending something else that's probably not the food, but then something like a clothes item or whatever. I'm not saying that any of that can't be bought. I am a massive advocate of saying, let's put the money for you to spend guilt-free into your money plans. That is a absolute must. I don't see that as something that you can negotiate. The problem lies is when you're doing it from a place of mindlessness and unconscious powerlessness. So not being able to have conscious power of your decision making when it comes to money, and that's the part that's really important when you're looking at how you're spending. A way to really reframe that is like, rather than talking about I'm spending, so I'm investing in myself. So what am I putting into myself is an investment. What I'm buying is an investment. My hair is an investment, like certain parts, and being very clear what, again, based on what's the value of you and your alignment to yourself, is understanding what the things are important to you. Have your non-negotiables, and then the thing is, it's just like, I do this on a regular basis. I buy this and actually, this is not in tune to me. So this is actually wasteful for me, and I can live without that. You know, what is it? How is it serving me? And just be mindful of that. You know, I had one client that she realised that every time she used to go to her local train station, she used to buy a tea from there, and she was like, it's just become a habit. Like, I don't want the tea, but it's just been a habit. And I tell her, it's £160 a month. It's like, could use that to something else. And I was like, I actually don't want it. So I'm not going to. And actually, there's something else that I really desire to focus and to be spending on. So I'm going to invest it in that and just put the kettle on before I leave the house, you know? And it's not a case of actually couldn't afford it. It's just like, it just had no value to it, you know? And it's just...
A lot of things are habit.
Yeah.
A lot of things are just, you know, you've got that. I mean, even things like subscriptions or whatever, it's just always been there.
Yeah.
And, you know, you may not use the gym, you may not use that, you know, that streaming service or whatever, but you just kind of always had it. It's always in the, you won't think about that 30 quid, that 50 quid a month that's just sort of coming out of your account. You don't use that. I think a lot of it, like you say, it's unconscious habits that people have and they don't realize.
Exactly. And how often do you challenge them? You know, it's just giving yourself that, you know, having that financial audit of like, does it serve the person that I am now?
Yeah, it's something I've been doing for 20 years, but it's not me. It's like literally, I've just always done it. Yeah. You mentioned investment early on, and I remember you said sort of like, you know, property, angel investing, etc., maybe stocks and shares. I'm honestly, I just never understood stocks and shares. It's just me. You do so to me. It's like I just feel like it's not the thing that suits me. But property, I'm very comfortable with. And do you find that an angel investing, I'm comfortable with? How do you navigate that space with people who are especially new to investing? Because it is quite a kind of, you're getting all these, day trade. I couldn't think of anything worse than day trading, to be honest. But you know what I mean? People are like, you've got to be actively, you know, investing in that way. So how do you sort of navigate that with people? Because it's quite an interesting space.
Yeah, it is. And you know, one of the things that always comes up, which is a real trigger point for women, stocks and shares seem too easy for you to be able to acquire wealth. It should be more complicated. Why is it I just put an automated amount of money into an account and then it just grows? I mean, it you know, in a very simplistic way, that is it. So long as you know, you have to obviously be mindful of what you're choosing and how you're doing it. But the whole process is you put money into stocks and shares, whether it's index fund, which is like a pool of companies that have different types of risk tolerance and risk level, and over time you make money on it, and at the end, all being that you've invested based on your type of risk tolerance and what level of wealth you want to acquire over a period of time, you get that money. And sometimes that just feels that there's a catch, that it's too easy, and the challenge is that, you know, don't I have to work harder for me to multiply wealth? And I feel that's one of the parts where sometimes women feel it's a challenge to come to terms with, that stocks and shares can be that easy. Because why has it seemed so
cloaks and daggers,
and just like mystery and like why you know, when it's this easy? It says, well, you know, about 20 years ago, the only way you could invest is through a financial advisor, and financial advisors were very expensive and still to a certain point can be quite expensive. So the access to entry wasn't as easy as it is now for you to be able to actually have stocks and shares. So it is very, in inverted commas, new for everybody to have equal opportunity to be able to invest. And it was only the financial advisors that were deemed the people that had all the knowledge and capability of doing it. But actually, it takes minutes now to be able to just get your £10, put it into a share or in an index fund and just start investing. It's that easy. So I feel it's challenging that that thought, you know, that feeling of, and the belief of that it has to feel hard in order for you to be able to multiply your wealth. I think that's one of the key the messages that I get from a lot of my female clients.
Sure. And do you feel like property is an interesting one in the UK? So I've got a few properties, but I invested early. So we're talking sort of pre-2008 for both, a couple of them, and then maybe 2014 for the other. But a lot of people are like, I can't, property is just prohibitive for me. But what I think they're not thinking about is, like you said, you've got one up, where you're from. So it's like they're not thinking outside of London. So, a lot of time people are just so limited to, this is what I know, and they're not even thinking about, more reasonable parts of London, sort of like, some parts of South London, maybe Croydon, etc. They're like, no. It needs to be down the road from me so I can look after it. It's just a very interesting psychology around,
Yeah, it definitely is. And like my brother's girlfriend bought her Greater Manchester 2-bedroom house for 80 grand a couple of years ago. It's like, and that's like barely a deposit for London. So it is, but again, it's how to look at it from a different perspective. What we are taught is that you buy the house, you live in it. But if you live in it, it's not an investment. It's more of a cash cow. Yes, if you're looking, you buy it in a place that increases equity quite significantly, which we did when in our flat in West London that we still have. That equity helped to buy our family home now. But that is still a possibility, potentially. Right now, how the property market has been, it's okay to say that you own a house and also rent, and I think people in the space of how property is need to think about how they can overcome that narrative that if I've got a property, then I can't rent, I need to be living in it. But if you would prefer to be living somewhere where you're priced out, but want to get in the property market by, creating some form of over time passive income, or over time be able to have some money that you'll be able to live off when you get to a certain point of life, then, that is an opportunity for you. That's a way. I think we just need to think about it differently. If we are getting priced out by the areas that we want to live in, there's other areas that you can absolutely afford. Had you just reach out that a little bit more, and be pragmatic. If it's important for you to be owning a property, I know a lot of mothers feel that that's the case. So then they feel like they then have something to give to their children that they can inherit. I think where mothers feel that it needs to be their family home, it's because it's the family home. And that, I guess, that's a different narrative to explore, that it has to be, your family home has to be something that you own. You can have multiple properties, a property per child. That isn't the one that you live in, but at least you know that you've got that money there. You've got that nesting egg for them that you're growing for their future.
I remember when I was at school, so I had a Taiwanese friend, and her parents had a family home, but they bought a flat for each of the daughters. When we were still 16, 17, we were doing A-levels at the time. And it was like, this is the investment that we're making, so that when you turn, 25, whatever, you're already on the ladder, you're whatever. And they weren't in amazing. Oh, well, actually, it's interesting. One of them was in an area that then gentrified, but they wouldn't have known that in advance. You see what I mean? So it was like part of East London that's now gentrified, but it wasn't at the time. And I can't remember what the other one was. But it was that thing of like, okay, not all property purchases have to be, I think they were in North London somewhere, really quite salubrious, but it's like, not everything has to be here. Why don't we go a little bit east? We can afford something. And I think, we're talking sort of maybe 25, 30 years ago. That was a good investment at the time, and it would have cost maybe 40k each. So they might have spent 80k on, 2 flats for their daughters. So there's stuff like that. But I think, people are really stuck on, I have to buy where I'm going to live. And then they get outpriced again, sort of like another few years, they're saving that deposit.
Yeah, and get outpriced again. Yeah.
Deposit.
Yeah.
You can't put down anything less, I don't think, than 50k in most, most doing like 1, 2. And that's for a flat. So, in terms of angel investing.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, just to add on that one as well. It's that just challenge yourself. Why do you want to buy out? Are you doing it just because everyone says that you need to be doing it? Is that the rite of passage of showing that you are a grown up and you've got your life together because you own a property? You know, is that the narrative that you're telling yourself? Is that what you really desire? What is it that you actually desire? What is actually of value to you, and what's important to you? And it may come back to the answer is that, yes, I want a property. Just challenge the idea of having one and ensuring it's coming from a place that is of value of you rather than what society tells you that you should be doing.
But I think it goes back to what we're saying about how we were raised, because a lot of people, that's what they were told for, all of their childhood. Like, you get a job, you get a good pension, you do this. Nobody's told, become an entrepreneur and, be a digital nomad and travel the world. And, you don't have to be stuck in one place. That conversation is never had. It was very much doctor, lawyer, accountant, engineer. And those were your 4 options. And then, if you were good at English, it was law. It was that simple. That no one's just decided what you were going to be at the age of 8 or something. But no, that's interesting. And angel investing, because I think that's something that people, again, might think it's a bit far away for them. They might think it's bigger than... They might think of it as being bigger than they can afford, but it's actually quite affordable. Could you sort of expand a bit on that and how people could get into it?
And again, for me, it's more around the mindset that I speak of angel investing, because what I know to be true, again, when I say, not exchanging your time for money, what I've noticed when people talk about angel investing and the thought of angel investing is like, oh my God, I owe somebody money and I'm in debt to somebody. All investing is a sexy way to say that you are borrowing money to somebody, which is debt, for them to then give you a return. Like it's just the rich person's way to explain how you're borrowing money to a company to get a return over time. And the reason why I talk about angel investing is because to expand the idea that wealthy people don't use their money to multiply their wealth, and to open your eyes and saying, actually, that is something that you can explore given whatever it is that you're looking to do in your business, and you having to actually front all of the cash that you invest in your business is a slower route. It's not the accelerated route. And if you're always thinking that you're having to create that money for your business to expand, you're already limiting yourself in the growth potential. Even going to a bank or maybe getting a loan, yes, that's a potential way. But actually, angel investing, if you think about it, when you're specifically looking for potential skill sets and knowledge and support, depending how much the investors want to have contribution or at least some say in terms of what it is that you're doing. You create your community in terms of building that wealth. Like, how many wealthy people say that they did it completely alone? None. And it's just a wonderful way and a different avenue to be able to create your tribe, create your community, to expand your business, expand your wealth, and expand your knowledge, skill set, growth in a more an accelerated way. That actually the compound effects that angel investing can give by just having somebody who's got the who has put money into your business, knows about your business now, and then we'll be talking to other people about what they're investing in, and then that can have a domino and multiplying effect. So that's what I always want to be speaking about when it comes to the angel investing, and have just a different perspective of like, okay, you can always go to the bank, but what more can you get? What more value can you get by actually looking at investors to be able to support you on your journey?
And what about someone who is like feeling quite overwhelmed by their finances at the moment? So someone who's like, okay, I mean, I remember a time in my 20s when I had MBNA calling me from all sorts of numbers, and I was like, I can't deal with this, etc. And actually, once I sat down and did the whole kind of, okay, how bad is this? And I, had a number, it was much easier. But I did bury my head for a few months because I was like, this is just way too much. So what advice do you give to people who are kind of feeling quite overwhelmed, maybe like salaries not quite matching what they need to be able to live comfortably and plan?
For me, it's to look the hardest part, which feels like the most overwhelming part, but actually the most liberating. When you give yourself the opportunity, is to look at every single number, is to look at it meticulously and have a look at them, because that feels and sounds very overwhelming. But actually, the moment that you confront the numbers, it feels very liberating and empowering. Why? Because now you can make smarter financial decisions, because the overwhelm comes from a place of not knowing, of the unknown, and not knowing what your next step should look like if you haven't got a handle of what is happening in your pocket, in your bank account. And that may take some time for you to actually start to do that and take it step by step. But every single client, hands down, who've just sat down and looked at their numbers, looked at their bank statements, have just gone, oh my goodness, had I just sat down under this exercise, I would have felt so much. What? That's coming out of here that I didn't know. I didn't realize how much I was spending on this, etc. That in itself is the most beneficial exercise you can do. If you're feeling overwhelmed, even the thought of doing that, then what I always advise is you have somebody within your network, whether it's a friend or a family member or whatever, is to buddy up and do it together. May not see each other's numbers, but just say, I'm going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to start looking at, yeah, exactly. And just to speak it out, because the more likely you're going to do it. And then when you're finding yourself contracted to actually do it, you find yourself talking yourself through why. And in that self is very therapeutic. It's very therapeutic and allows you to take, okay, I'm not going to take this whole big step. I'm just going to get 1 month's worth of bank statements, or I'm just going to get the smaller, credit card debt that I have, and just have a look what's happening there. And just incrementally take stock in terms of that.
And in terms of, so I think sometimes a lot of people are like, okay, all I need to do is make more money, which is great, it's sort of increasing your income, etc. But I think the transition, I mean, we touched on it a little bit before, from from being employed to being, to having, whether it's a side hustle or like going into another job. Can you talk a little bit about sort of how you did that? Like, did you stay in your job for a couple of years until?
Yes, I did. So I stayed on my job for a couple of years. But going back to this, the whole life will get better if I earned more money. The way that you manage £20, £200, £2,000, £20,000, you can manage them all the same way. Like, money isn't always going to be the out. More money is not always going to be out. So there is going to be, to a certain period of to a certain extent, if your needs are not being met, that is when money is going to make a difference in your life. And if you haven't got the right behaviors when it comes to money, more money is not going to be the answer for you. Because I know many entrepreneurs that, I've got the 6 figures and I still feel broke. I've got the multiple six figures and I still feel broke. And it just doesn't stop. It's because they are still taking the beliefs, the ways that they think about money in every stage and level of their elevation of income and earnings. So until you actually start to realize that changing your perspective and your psychology with money, that's the only way that you're actually going to feel richer, when you actually growing the amount of money that comes into your pocket. I
think there's something around, I mean, we talked about it at the very beginning around the scarcity mindset. And, you know, that's something, there's guys that are sort of serial entrepreneurs and they've, you know, exited with sort of like millions, and they were always asked the question, how much is enough? And, you know, typically they'll be like, oh, you know, if you asked me that question 10 years ago, I'd have said $1 million, you know. And then if you asked me that question 5 years ago, I would have said 5 million or 10 million. And now it's like, it needs to be. So no matter, you know, how much they have, in their minds, it's still not enough, because it could all disappear one day, because they've grown up in a scarcity mindset where they're like, you know, it could just, and you're thinking to yourself, well, how would it disappear unless you were to spend that? You know what I mean? It wouldn't necessarily disappear. You could invest in that, but they still have that belief that it could disappear. So now they're like, well, unless it's 50 million, I do. And I know that when they get to 50 million, they will be like, it needs to be $1 billion. You know, you can't change, well, you can change your mindset, but you can't change that belief in someone who hasn't sort of done the work to really explore where that comes from and what that's really about, you know what I mean? So,
exactly. And going back to Simone Biles, like, she knew that she couldn't continue competing until she got her mind and body right. And mind, and I say spiritually, body, and when I say body, I mean spiritually, you know, the feeling of your body, your mind can maybe trick you to believe that you're okay, but the body never lies. It still holds a lot of the trauma. The nervous system holds a lot of it, and that's what some of our impulse reactions are to certain things that you don't realize still impact you. And she knew she couldn't continue, she couldn't compete until she got that right. And a lot of people just keep chasing the money, thinking that's going to solve all the problems. So the more of it is going to be the part when you go, I'm okay now, when it's not the case at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said yours was specific around the trauma, sort of, and I think that's a bit maybe where people haven't explored that. But so that, you know, my one experience with MBNA has changed how I deal with credit cards. You know, ever since then, it was like my first credit card. I didn't really, you know what I mean, know what I was doing, and then ended up without employment. I was like, I have this massive bill that you know what I mean, I hadn't really thought this through, that I wouldn't have a job for a few months, etc. So I think there's something around that, and like you say, the body holding on to things, and people not realizing that their illness is linked to some unresolved patterns, beliefs, etc., values. So it's something that I think it's good to have that 6-month exploration, let's say, really go through it, because it's more than money. Like you say, it is a little bit more around who they are as a person and what they really want to achieve coming out of it. So do a lot of your clients sort of come back to you sort of years later, and it's like, this is what's happened and I've got my first house?
So I had one who, when I think she was my second client, like 3.5 years ago. Yeah, she was my second client, and she messaged me in April saying, remember that 5-year plan? I've done it in 3. I've got my house.
Aww.
Yeah. She was just like, oh my God, I was on the train and just cried. Because that's what it's all about. And I was just so elated and so happy. And that's the thing as well, with like the trust in the process, where I did a shorter 1-to-1 with somebody for 12 weeks. And her whole perception of money completely transformed, but the result didn't really come through until about 9 months later. She was just like, I'm messaging you to tell you that a job just fell on my lap with nearly 2.5 times the salary in the same company, and I did barely nothing to get it, you know. And it's the foundation. And it's just that it's the foundations I just over time has just accumulated in terms of what we did. And I just know it's the work that we did in order for me to get there, because it came with ease, absolute ease, and didn't have to work hard for it. Now we did a few sessions just to help her feel that she can hold that type amount of wealth, because what ends up happening is that people say they would love to win the lottery, but how do you calibrate holding that amount of money? And there's a lot of recalibration that is required to you be able to actually hold on to that amount of wealth if it's come to you in an accelerated, in an accelerated speed that you wasn't anticipating. Incrementally, it helps you to like recalibrate to what the new evolution is. But sometimes if it's greater, then it's kind of like, you know, the gremlins of like, oh, now I've got it, like, am I really worth that? You know, does it mean I'm going to have to like, you know, give everything of my life because they're paying me more? You know, it's all those stories that you start telling yourself that they surely can't be paying me that much for just that. I mean, I'm not really having to do anything different other than just what I'm doing now. And it's like, you know, there's a reason for that. Your worth is not attached to the amount of money that you earn. And it's just being able to decouple those and be able to not feel guilty that you've now probably jumped a few income brackets to friends, to family. And how do you feel like you can integrate being around them, because you're going to be able to have a larger capacity to be able to make better choices and better options, and your decisions are not made from money. It's actually what you actually desire, which is an amazing place to be. But it actually does mean that you may feel that people may look at you differently because in your space, because you can afford more and do more, and taking the responsibility of how other people are going to feel because you are at that level, in that position.
I think it means that a lot of people have to, but obviously you can't change your family, but a lot of people do have to change their social group sometimes, because it is difficult to have gone into a different bracket. Not necessarily that you're splashing the wealth or anything like that, but it's like if your mindset has changed, that you're surrounded by the same people who, you know, are very comfortable sort of paycheck to paycheck, or, you know, a very different way of living, then you need to, and it can be quite lonely, I think, then. And so people can almost sabotage because they're thinking, I was okay then with less. Yeah. Whereas now I'm having all of this. And, you know, I know a guy who won the lottery. He didn't win loads. He won a few million. He dated a friend of mine, and he was paralyzed with like what to do, because he didn't want to outgrow his social group. It's like, if I suddenly buy all the cars that I've always wanted to buy, and, you know, buy the house, then I'm going into a different area, and, you know, and he wasn't comfortable with that level. Yeah, so there's something around that.
That's why 77% of lottery winners lose all their money.
Yeah.
In the first few years.
And I totally get it. Yeah, they're just like, you know, I was okay on my paycheck to paycheck, and, you know, I've done a few, you know, big things, but I don't need this ongoing, so they haven't done the work. So, no, that's been really interesting. So, how do people find you?
Yeah, so Instagram and LinkedIn, as I mentioned, under my name, so you can find me there.
Okay, then. And typically, sort of, is there a waiting list for people to come and see you? Sort of like, you know, is there...
Yeah, so I have 2 spaces for one-to-one, and I'm running a workshop end of September, which is a waiting list on my LinkedIn or an Instagram. So if you can just go on, you can go in there and put your email address in the waiting list, and then as soon as it's open, I will be in touch for you to give you more further details. But it's all around planning financial life, with value-based financial goals. And we'll be working firstly more around the psychology and the mindset to get you right into getting it into the planning, really starting to instill what those value-based goals are, and then we will go straight into the execution of planning and what aligned action you can take to walk away in embedding that plan.